Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about how to improve in League of Legends. We're going to talk about what's important to improve on, why it's important to improve on these things, and how to do so. This is not going to be a clickbait video. It's very much just like a conceptual video. And I think if you've come here looking for how to improve in 5 minutes, that sort of thing, you sort of come to the wrong place. It's going to be very in-depth. But if you do want like a TLDR, I do have that timestamp below. So if just, you don't have much time, you can just go ahead and watch the TLDR at the end. But I do recommend listening to the reasoning because I think it's quite important. So let's go ahead and get straight into the video. So I'm going to define for you guys what I think the fundamentals in League are. To me, the fundamentals are things that will happen every single game. It's things that if you improve on, they will have an effect on every single one of your League games. And things that I think aren't fundamental are things that don't happen as often. So if we look at these examples I have here, I think there are probably more than this, but these are the ones that I think are most important. There will always be a laning phase, there will always be farming, there will always be team fighting, there will always be mechanics, you'll always play a champion, and there will always be map awareness and warding. So basically, guys, the most important things that make up your journey are these things that they're gonna have some impact on your game, and it's very important to kind of focus your effort in these areas because it's gonna lead to the most reward. If you focus on something that doesn't happen every game, it might still be useful, but simply put, it just doesn't occur in as many games, so the skill is, or the time investment rather, is somewhat wasted. So to build on from that, because I think these are the most important fundamentals, something I get asked a lot is do I need to be good at X to reach challenger? Do I need to be good at laning? Do I need to be good at farming? Or what are the, what are the three most important things that you need to reach challenger? And the thing is, really, guys, that there's a lot of ways that you can get challenger. For example, you could have let's just say challenger is 42 points. You could have a 9 in laning and a 5 in farming. There's there's a lot of people in challenger that are very good at some things and very bad at other things. So this is kind of how I see it, is that being challenger, it's an average of all your scores. So this is, or of all your skills, I guess. So this is just an example, the actual numbers don't really matter. But what I'm trying to say is that, for example, if you're very good at laning, so you have a 9, very good at team fighting, you can be very poor at farming. There's lots of ways you can reach challenger, and it could depend somewhat on the champions you play. For example, there will be people that are really good at roaming, where they have good team fighting and good mechanics, but they're very bad at farming and laning or something like that. So yeah, I think it's really hard to answer the question of what do I need to do to reach challenger sort of thing, because there are so many different ways you can do it. There's really so many different fundamentals that you can work on and so many different skills that you can bring to the table. And all that matters really is that you have a high enough average that you get to challenger. That being said, it is much easier to say improve. Let's say we have let's say our mechanics are, or actually no, let's change it. Let's say, to use these examples again, let's say our farming is a 6 and our laning is an 8. So we still have enough points, right? But obviously it's much easier for us to improve our 6 to a 7 than our 8 to a 9, because it's just less to improve on. And generally when you're kind of at these earlier levels in your skill, it's just easier to improve those. So while you could get to challenger by being say a 10 at laning and a 10 at farming or something, and then having very low scores in team fighting and mechanics or whatever, it is very easy, at least I think it is much easier to kind of bring up your lower scores than it is to already increase your higher scores. That being said, for a lot of people, they might not enjoy parts of the game. So you might not like farming that much, so you play a champion that doesn't need to farm and can instead focus on laning and team fighting. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way. I do think these are the most important fundamentals to reiterate, because they occur every game, and you just need to be good at enough of them that your skill or in those concepts and those fundamentals carries you to whatever rank you want it to be. So whether that's diamond, challenger, or whatever. To give you guys an example of things that I think aren't fundamental, again, those things that don't happen every game, we have some stuff like this, and I've kind of assigned a different amount of points for each one. So something like a post-Baron setup, this happens reasonably often. I wouldn't say it happens every game, but it probably, it happens every now and again. If you play a bunch of League games in a day, you're definitely going to see it 2 or 3 times, but it's not something that happens every game. So in this kind of case, rather than being out of 10, it might be out of a 5. There's still some points, obviously, if you get good at this, you will reap some rewards from it, but it's not going to be the same kind of rewards that you reap from the more fundamental skills. Then we have some more niche things here. So for example, playing a 1-3-1, I feel this doesn't happen that much in solo queue. If you play say 10 League games in a day, this might occur once or twice. Again, basically it's being good at a 1-3-1 is like, it's a valuable skill, you know, but it's not as valuable as some of the others. And I think when you're learning, like figuring out where to focus your time is very, very important. So something like this, I'd say it doesn't contribute that much to your overall score just because it doesn't happen that much. And then we have stuff that's super, super specific. And I think this is what I see on Reddit like all the time. So knowing how to play versus Evelyn when you have no flash, it's like, you know, it's going to help you in that game. But how often does this happen? Like, maybe if you play against Evelyn a lot, you know, it might happen a lot. But for me, I maybe play against Evelyn, let's say 1 in like 20 games. You know, it's not an uncommon champ, but it's also not picked every game. So if you didn't know how to do this, like, it's not the end of the world, just because like it doesn't affect the entire game and it doesn't happen every game. So I always see these tips on Reddit or these questions on Reddit asking about how to play out like super specific situations. And like, it's good, right? It's good to know what to do in these situations, but not good to know what you do in these situations at the cost of other stuff. Like, if you're looking to improve on stuff, don't worry about these super niche situations. Instead, focus on the fundamentals and understanding the game. And then you can learn kind of the higher level, very specific, like niche situation stuff later. So when you are looking to improve, it's much easier to kind of focus on one thing at a time. I see a lot of people try to improve something more generally. So they might say like, I really want to improve my laning, or maybe just even, I really want to improve my early game. And it's way too broad. You need to be very, very specific. So I think the best way to do this is to first kind of like break down what goes into these bigger fundamentals. So I've kind of done this in a few of my videos already. You know, I've done a full laning guide, I've done like a champion pool guide, and I've also done a like tracking and warding guide. So I'll definitely have to do stuff on the others, like the team fighting and stuff like that. So you can go refer to those videos, obviously, if you don't know kind of how to break down these concepts. But let's look at laning as an example. So within laning, and to be honest, we could actually break it down more than this, but at the start, we can break this down into like wave manipulation, trading, movement, matchups, positioning, and cooldowns. And so this is getting more specific, but it still doesn't really give us like the right thing to improve on. The main thing is, because like if you go into a game, if you go into a solo game and you say, I really want to improve my trading, it's not specific enough. It really just, it's not something like, okay, you can focus, you can like think about your trading, but you need something that's like very, very specific, something that you can, what you want is that after the game, you can tell if you like accomplished your objective or not. So for example, if we take trading here, we can break it down further. Let's take it real simple. Looking to punish my opponent when they go for his CS. So there could be like lots of different things for trading. It could be like, you know, it could be like trading with level advantage or trading with HP advantage. You know, there's like a lot of different things. But let's just take looking to punish my opponent when they go for a CS, because what this does is you will be consciously thinking about like when you play this solo queue game, you'll be thinking about like punishing your opponent whenever they go for a CS, and you can kind of realize, you can like think to yourself after the game, like, did I actually do that well? You can we'll talk about this a bit more later, but you can go in the replay, you can check if you punish your opponent when they went for CS. You know, this is a very specific goal. It's something that you can like focus your attention on, and something that I think is quite important is you can realize if you've done this well or not. There's like a feedback on it. One thing that I think people struggle with when they're low elo is, let's say they want to focus on trading, but they don't make it very specific. Sometimes it can be hard to tell if you actually traded well or not, because like simply put, you don't know enough about the game, right? Like I think at a high level, I can kind of tell if I traded well or not, but if you're much newer to the game, it's going to be very, very hard. So I think the best thing you can do is you take your fundamental, so let's say laning, we break it down further into kind of the laning concepts, and then we break it down into a specific goal that you can keep in mind when you play solo queue. So it's very, very important that every time you play a solo queue game that you have some kind of like goal or something that you're trying to focus on. Simply put, just mindlessly grinding solo queue is probably the worst, not the worst way, it's like the least efficient way to improve. There's like, you know, there are much easier and better ways to kind of spend your time to have like a much greater return in terms of improvement than if you just queue up like 10 hours a day. I'm not denying that if you queue up 10 hours a day, you will get better, but it's like you can easily queue up 10 hours a day and not get better. And also it's much easier if you just play, say, a couple games a day, but you know, you're focusing on the right things, you're like doing a little bit of review and stuff like that. So again, if you kind of need, I guess, like clarification on what these like specific goals could be, I really recommend checking out like the guides I've done so far on like laning, laning, warding, champions, stuff like that. I think I go pretty in depth, but obviously if you have any questions, drop them below or drop them in the Discord and I'll try to respond to them. So let's talk about some other ways to improve that aren't just solo queue, because I think solo queue is the one that everyone knows, but a lot of people don't know how to like use the other ones or kind of what they're used for. So the first is replays. So replays is something that I think for the average low elo player is very not useful, mainly because in the way they kind of do it. So I think when you do replays or when you watch either your own replay or other people's replays, there's a couple different approaches you can take to it, but I think it's really important that you don't bite off more than you can chew. Simply put, if you're a low elo player, you're not gonna like know a lot of the stuff you're looking for. And I get comments like that on some of those videos where I do like reviews of pro players, or when I play my solo queue games. There's a lot of stuff there that I have to say because you guys don't see it. So I think the best way to kind of use replays is when we have our like solo queue goal up here, like if we have, say, looking to punish my opponent when they go for a CS, the way you can do this is after you play a game, all you can do is like literally take like 3 minutes or 2 minutes to skim through your laning phase and just check, did I actually like harass them on creeps, and like were there any opportunities I missed. I think watching the whole replay, like, if you know what you're looking for, it can be useful. But I really think like honing in on that one thing you're focusing on is really, really important. So especially when you're like lower elo, I'd say like below master or so, I would just recommend only watching your own replays for the specific thing you're looking for and just looking to see if you've done it well, basically. And I think for pretty much everyone, when you're watching other people's replays, there's a bit more you can do with it. But I think, again, like one thing you should really look for is just look to see how they're applying that concept you're looking for. So again, for example, if we go to like, just looking to punish my opponent when they go for a CS, you can be like, okay, why you want to kind of like get in their head. You want to think about, or at least try to think about, like why or why not they might have like harassed or not harassed someone when they went for a CS. Basically, you just want to kind of get like more repetitions, I guess, or more like data in your head of like seeing the situation of harassing an opponent when they go for a CS over and over, and just like focusing on that. There's so many times where I've just like loaded up a replay and I've literally only watched like the first 5 minutes, or I've literally only watched like the first 10 minutes. I think a lot of people, when they look up replays, they go and watch the whole thing, and it's not only inefficient, but also there's just like too much to focus on at once. So I really recommend like focusing on a little chunk of the game, and that'll be much better for you. Another way you can kind of use replays, like other people's replays in general, is you could broaden it a bit. So for example, if you wanted to watch the entire lane phase rather than just watching for that specific thing, is like I was saying before, just try and like figure out what they're thinking or like why they're doing stuff. One thing that I've like heard people do is that they pause the game and they pause the video and they try and think like what that person is going to do in the next 10 seconds, and then they play it out. Like, they unpause the video, they see what that person did, and then they think why not. I think that's very like time intensive, but it can be a good way to kind of like get yourself in their shoes. But basically you really want to like watch these replays, like looking for a specific thing, whether it's like the whole laning phase, whether it's like wave manipulation to make it more specific, or harassing on CS to make it really specific, and then just like looking to understand the why around all that stuff. So the next way is watching streamers. So I think this is actually really, really useful depending on who you watch. So I think like there are a lot of streamers that explain their thought process. I think especially if the streamer's chat is moving insanely fast, you can get questions, you can ask questions and you can get them answered. So a little self plug here, but go follow Twitch TV/ShokLol if you haven't already. I'll be streaming next week when I move into my new apartment. But anyway, so I think streamers are a pretty good way. I think it's like pretty easy for you to just like, well, I don't know, there's a couple of things here. So first, like watching streamers, it can be non-productive. I think it's very easy to watch a streamer and just like fall into like you're just watching them for fun. Basically, you're not taking anything away from it. I don't think you need to be like hyper focused, but I think like if you basically just listen to what they say, especially if there's someone that explains himself kind of like what I do, you can take away kind of like a lot of information sort of by osmosis. You don't even need to like be focusing on like why I'm doing everything. You just need to kind of like almost like absorb what you're seeing. And I think if you can find a streamer that does play like the same champ as you or plays like similar champs to you, That can be really, really helpful. I think streamers, it's definitely like an underutilized resource. Like I think a lot of people, watch streamers for fun and stuff like that, which is, I like watching streams for fun too. But it's a really good way to improve as well. So the next thing is playing champions that test the fundamental that you want to learn. So for example, if we go back to this like one that we're doing over and over, there are certain champions that punish on like when the opponent goes for a CS better than others. So if you wanted to learn this, it would be kind of hard to learn this if you're playing a champion like Twisted Fate, because, well, Twisted Fate doesn't have the tools to harass his opponent whenever they go for a CS. If you're playing Twisted Fate versus Syndra, for example, it's mainly going to be about defensive laning. It's going to be about like practicing dodging skill shots. It's going to be like practicing like avoiding ganks, but it's not going to be at all about like punishing your opponent when they go for CS. So if you have a certain like fundamental or like specific concept that you're trying to learn, it can help to kind of play champions that are really suited for that. So like for our example here, we have champions like Syndra, champions like Orianna, champions like Lucian, where they've got like ranged auto attacks, they've got low cooldowns, they can look to punish like really, really often. So I think that's like kind of important, because like there are champions that sort of invalidate different fundamentals. So if we take Ahri as an example, Ahri very OP in the meta, and kind of invalidates a lot of like the jungle tracking stuff, because she's so mobile that even if she gets ganked, most of the time she can get out of it. So in a way, you can sort of use this to cheese, or I wouldn't call it cheesing. It's like playing for your strengths and like nullifying your weaknesses. So like if, for example, if we go like way back up to all the way up here, if, for example, your map awareness and warding was really low, one way, if you just like you didn't care about improving the skill, if you just wanted to like rank up, you could play a champion that kind of band-aid fixes that. And there are a lot of champions that do kind of like band-aid fix certain things. So for example, for laning, you'll have like a lot of roaming champions don't really have to lane. They can push so much, or they just like don't really need to lane at all. And so that's not something you'll need to worry about. There are also, say, maybe assassin champions where like farming isn't as important, or there might be some farming champions where farming is so easy that it's not really something you need to think about. So there's a lot of stuff like that where you can kind of like play champions that test the fundamental you want to learn, or if you're just like looking to kind of like gain a little bit of temp healer, or if you're like almost at your goal, you just need that little bit extra, you could play a champion that kind of like helps play towards your strengths. The last one we have is coaching. So coaching is an interesting one. I am going to go like way more in depth into this in a video in a couple days, because I will be starting up my own coaching. But some things I just want to say basically are that coaching should be seen as it's very efficient, and it saves you a lot of time and it saves you a lot of energy, because you're going to get all this knowledge in like a short amount of time. You're going to get like things to work on. You don't have to like go through videos to kind of find the knowledge and everything like that. But that being said, you don't need coaching. Like all the stuff you need to reach Challenger is already out there on the internet, but it can be like hard to find. It can be hard to kind of implement. There's plenty of like good channels, I think, like mine, like Coach Curtis. If you're playing mid lane, like there's other ones for other roles, right? So yeah, it's like you don't need coaching, but I think coaching is very valuable. It's just like how much do you value like the money versus time, basically. One other thing is there actually are many sessions out there of people coaching other people, so like if, for example, like paying for coaching is too much for you, you could either like watch, there's plenty of like free VODs of on YouTube of like people getting coached like by LS. I know like Vagar V2 has like a Patreon with a bunch of coaching VODs on it. So yeah, there's basically like a lot of ways that you can get coaching, although it won't be specific for you. And I guess like again, something that's like it's not exactly coaching, but like feel free to come to my Discord and just like ask questions, or just like come to my stream and ask questions. Again, I'll be streaming in like a week probably when I move to my new apartment, or again, you can like drop stuff in the YouTube comment section below and I'll usually reply to them. So yeah, I think that while that's not like direct coaching, it still kind of helps you write like a little bit of Q&A. The last thing that I really want to talk about is just that it takes time. So one thing about League, and I guess like one reason why I suggest like really honing in on that goal, is that it's very difficult to isolate things in League. The practice tool is not really a great tool for learning. A lot of the concepts can't really be practiced elsewhere. So if you just like think of some of the league things in general. I think like laning is maybe like the most reproducible thing, because you could go and play a 1v1 against like your friend or something, and you could play a lot of the concepts and just like practice things like that. So I think that's a good way of doing it. But let's say you want to improve your team fighting, and let's say you want to improve like your positioning in team fighting. The problem is that you get like maybe like 4 or 5 team fights in a league game. So basically, if you want to improve this, you're like queuing up for a game, and then only this tiny little section of the game is actually helpful to you. And the reason I think this is like, I've got like difficulty of league compared to other games here, is because other games that I've played where I've like identified the fundamentals and I've improved at them is because it's been much easier to practice. So to give you guys some examples of this, I was master in StarCraft playing Zerg, and in StarCraft you might have fundamentals like macro, you have micro, etc. Like there's a bunch, right? But in that game, there's like specific micro tools where you can practice like playing out a scenario over and over. You can practice your build order, you can practice like your macro cycles and stuff like that, or in a custom game, you can practice a huge amount of this stuff without having to like play a full game. And that's kind of like one very unfortunate thing about League, is that oftentimes these things that you want to practice can only be practiced by playing a full-length game. To give you guys another example, at the end of last year when I stopped playing Pro, I was super bored, right? So I started playing Apex Legends, and before that, I'd never played like a competitive FPS ever. I'd played like Call of Duty Zombies and stuff like that, right? But I'd never played Overwatch like more than like a couple hours. I'd never played Counter-Strike more than like 3 or 4 hours. So basically, when it came to FPS, I was just like terrible. I remember first day of Apex, I got like maybe like 3 kills in like 3 hours. Like I was just terrible, right? And about 200 days later, I hit Master Tier, and that was like pretty crazy for me, because it kind of it meant to me at least that my kind of way of learning the game, of like making a method, like you guys can tell, right, I'm a very analytical person. My way of like having a method to improving, identifying the fundamentals, it worked on other games. It weren't just League of Legends. So in Apex, for example, I'd say the biggest fundamentals are stuff like I think aiming is a huge part of it, movement is a big part of it, and like movement can be easily practiced. Like in the firing range, aiming, you have aim trainers. I played a ton of Kovacs. And then there are like some that are maybe a bit harder, like stuff like positioning and stuff like that. But my point is basically that compared to League, a lot of these other games have like these huge fundamental sections which are very easy to practice like in isolation, and that's not something that League has. So basically, in League of Legends, it's going to take a long time to improve one of these bigger general concepts like laning. But I think if you set yourself like these very specific goals, like related to a section, so like to give some more laning examples, let's say like you really want to punish your opponent when they go for CS, you really want to punish your opponent when they go for a cooldown, you've got these like different things that you can work on, and that's kind of as specific as you can get. I think you can like go into a solo queue game with that in mind. You can like quickly review your replay like 2 minutes to see if you did that. You can watch other people's VODs with that in mind, and you can like watch streamers with that in mind. There's a lot of ways to do it. But I just wanted to mention that because I think League, compared to other games, is very difficult to improve at, because like not only is it very complex, not only are there like so many like turning cogs in the wheel, but it's also just, it's not very easy to focus on these things. There aren't like tools available to really hone in on these without just like playing a full-length game. So guys, I'll try to give you a brief TLDR. I think the best way to improve in League of Legends is to like focus on one of those fundamentals that's going to like happen every single game, and then break that down into a really small specific goal. So we have laning, below that we have like trading, below trading we've got like punishing your opponent whenever they go for a CS, and then play solo queue goals with that in mind. Play just like every time you queue up, just say, okay, this game I'm going to focus on doing this. And then after that, check your replay, just like 2 minutes, check to see if you've done that thing. Some other ways you can improve, you can watch streamers, you can watch other people's replays. Again, you want to hyper focus. You really want to like zero in on that one thing that you're trying to improve, and just like try to get way better at it. So guys, that is going to be it for this video. I think it was a very conceptual video, but I think it kind of like needed to be made. There's a lot of questions that I got about improving, and also like I feel like I've given you a lot of information and not said that well, like how to actually improve or how to actually implement this into your gameplay. So hopefully this will help, guys. I will have another video coming just in a couple days. I'm talking about like coaching a bit more in depth, and starting up my coaching. So yeah, stay tuned for that, guys, and I'll see you next time.